So you got your master's, right? Your
Yes.
master's in science and everything. And what is it you do? Because I was looking at your title and everything, and I pulled it up and I forgot it. Can you tell me about that real
Yeah,
quick?
yeah. So
Okay.
I'm a certified athletic trainer. So a
Okay.
lot of people refer to us as trainer,
Yeah.
and that's like nails on a chalkboard.
You
Because you can
probably
be a
hate
trainer of a
that.
lot of things. You
Yeah.
can be an elephant trainer. We're not elephant trainers. We actually work in sports medicine. So what I
Okay.
do, I actually currently work for Amazon as an injury prevention specialist.
Hell yeah.
But
Okay.
before coming to Amazon as an injury prevention specialist, normally you'll see athletic trainers. When people get injured in a sporting event, the person that runs out on the field to take care of them, or the court, depending on what sport, that is an athletic trainer.
Yeah.
And so we're there a lot more than people realize. We're there before practice starts to get the athletes ready for practice or games. We're there during the games or practice, and then we're there after to help with recovery. So we help with
That's awesome.
prevention, injury management, if it happens, and then the recovery on the backside as well. So
Well, it's funny too because I being in college and everything and learning about athletic trainers, I think everything is so pigeonholed with how athletic trainers can go about making their living after they get their degree. Because I think for me, I always thought it was literally just that. I didn't even know you could be injury prevention for Amazon. I didn't know you could take it
yeah.
to that. So I feel,
It's a newer side of it. The
yeah,
industrial side is growing.
yeah,
I think Frito-Lay might have actually been one of the pinnacle companies of bringing athletic trainers on. I know Boeing has
really,
some. Yeah,
okay.
it's growing, and I got to tell you, the money's pretty good on that side too.
Well, I was going to
So
ask you,
that's
like
helpful.
from a career standpoint, does it make more sense to just go down the road of industrial injury
You know,
prevention?
yes, and so it's twofold, right? Like
Okay.
I can tell you that coming into industry, if I would have done it right off the bat, may not have been the best call right out of school, because I
Yeah.
can tell you I'm using a lot of my experiences before I got here to do what I do. Now, it's not to say that somebody can't come in entry level, but I can tell you that you play on experiences from before to be able to better work within the setting, because really and truly, we're acting as first aid providers,
Okay.
because we have to operate under OSHA's conservative care first aid protocols. If we do anything beyond that, it turns the injury into a recordable injury.
Yeah.
And for the industrial world, that is like a dirty word. That is a curse
Recordable
word.
injury. That's like,
Yeah.
so it's in the records. It's like it's there.
It essentially, it's if they receive care greater than first aid. So if they go to a
Mm.
doctor and they receive medication that's more than over
Oh
the
yeah.
counter, if they receive a rigid brace, like there's all these different things that classify it. But our goal is to make sure that we not only help in minimizing recordable injuries, but really to minimize injuries in the first place. So that's a bigger part of what we do. So having that background of finding different ways to watch body mechanics as people are working in path,
Yeah.
and that kind of stuff, that helps lead to preventing injuries down the road. So
I guess you could just brush it under the rug, if you do more
I
than first
mean,
aid, be like, no, they were fine.
no, they're fine.
It's
They're
okay,
fine.
just a scrape.
That's kind of frowned upon.
Yeah. You mean that would get you fired or something?
Yeah.
That would, no.
I mean,
Totally.
I don't know that my employer would hate it that much, but OSHA definitely
I
frowns upon
swear
it.
nothing more happened. It was fine. Yeah. No, but yeah, that's just new to me. That's so cool because I even think that it's better to go down that road from the get-go. And I already said it earlier, just because of the level of buildup it seems like that you have in the traditional athletic training world, because the ones making the most money or making the biggest impact on that setting are the ones on like the big football teams or like the big teams and that kind of thing. So you always hear about like, the Alabama athletic trainer or something like
Roll
that.
Tide.
Yeah, roll Tide. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But
Jeff
yeah.
Allen, he's paving the way for the rest of us. There's no doubt, because he's
Who's
not
that? Say
just
that name
there.
again. What's
Jeff Allen.
Jeff Allen. Okay.
Yeah, he's the head athletic trainer at Alabama.
Nice.
The director, I don't know his official title, but he's the main guy for football, but also for sports medicine and or for athletic training at Alabama. So
who is okay? So there's another guy who works there,
Scott Cochran.
Scott Cochran.
Yes,
I've
so
worked for
he's
his
strength
brother.
and conditioning. Okay, so he's strength and conditioning, and he's actually at Georgia now.
Oh, okay. I'm way behind. Jesus. All right. Damn, I got to catch up. Okay, because that's where my head went, and then you mentioned the name. I was like, I'm about to sound really stupid right now. Who the hell's that?
No, you're
So
good. You're good. So
yeah.
Scott
Okay.
Cochran's on the strength and conditioning side. So those guys are the ones that get them fit from the weightlifting side,
Nice.
preventative in terms of exercises that they need to do to keep them strong, get them strong, ready for gameplay. So we're more on the sports medicine side of, preventing the injuries in terms of prehab,
Yeah.
taking care of injuries after they happen, rehabbing them, that kind of stuff. And Jeff is really cool because he's the guy that is not just doing the bare minimum for athletic training. Like obviously he's got the spotlight being at Alabama, but he's looking at ways that he can influence the industry. So the
I like
pop-up
that.
sideline tents that you see now,
Yeah.
that was a concept of Jeff Allen's, working with our engineering department saying, hey,
Holy
I
cow.
have this idea. And they got some students to work with him, and lo and behold, now we have the sideline tent, and that was a big change for the industry because a lot of people don't think about it. A lot of people want to see what's going on. They want to see what's happening with that athlete. But what you don't realize is there's a lot of fear that
Yeah.
happens post injury. And so the more we can minimize the eyes on the situation, the better we can perform in evaluating that injury. But also it helps that athlete, right? Because
Yeah.
they know all eyes are on them and they're freaking out, not just because they're hurt, but they're also in a lot of different ways thinking about what's next. Am I done? Is this something I can come back from? Is this something I can come back in this game from?
Yeah.
Or is it something that's gonna
Dramatic.
take some time? And so there's all these thoughts being processed. And so to be able to have that privacy,
Yeah.
to take them in and actually go through those evaluations is a big ordeal. So
You could just
big fan of Jeff.
or the moments where you have to like tell it to them straight and be like, you're done. You
Yeah,
can't.
and that's a tough conversation to have. Like
Hard.
most athletes nowadays, I think, years ago, it was probably a different story when you told somebody that they tore their ACL, but definitely everybody knows what that means now. That is, a few months of rehab. That means surgery for the most
Yeah.
part, especially if you're a high level athlete. And so having to tell somebody that you've had this major injury that's going to take you
Life-changing
out for a
thing.
little while is definitely life changing. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, they're athletes, it's not that big of a deal, but it is, because that's their livelihood, right? Like
Yeah.
that's what they thrive off of. And so and a lot of them find self-worth in sport. And so remembering that there's all these mental factors that go with it. So we actually end up really close with our athletes, and it's because you do spend a lot of time with them. Like I said, we're there before practice, getting them taped up. We're there during practice. So we're there interacting while they're learning and getting better for their sport. But then we're
Yeah.
also there afterwards. And so there's a relationship that's built there and a trust. And so they know when you're shooting it to them straight and when you're in serious mode versus more relaxed, there's times to be both. And so they can read off of that as well. And,
Yeah.
it's a special part of what we get to do. There is no doubt about that. And it's different in industry because that interaction is a lot less. It's a
Sure,
lot
it's
more.
way different. Yeah.
It's very
A little
different.
more
Yeah,
impersonal. Yeah, probably.
for sure.
But you mentioned the ACL thing too. It's so like talking to people. There are so many ways that you can develop a career just like simply around the ACL rehab
Hmm.
like world, and it's just ACL. I've talked to therapists and they only focus on, like, there was one lady, she rehabbed female soccer players and it was like all ACL basically. It was
Yeah.
specifically ACL. I'm like,
Because here's the
fine.
thing, we know that prevention, if we can prevent the ACL injury in the first place, that's key, right?
Yeah.
And so looking into specifics of what usually goes down into, maybe their hip strength isn't great. So we want to make sure they have good hip strength because everything's connected. Even though it's the knee that is injured, we want to make sure that their hips stay strong. We want to make sure that
Sure.
the core is strong. And so, in a lot of what we do, we care for these injuries afterwards, but if we can find a way to prevent them from happening in the first place through strengthening, through changing body mechanics overall, that's the win-win, right? That's the moneymaker in the long run for both athletics and industry.
It's true. And it's that transferability, because
Yeah.
it's making sure you could do all these things outside of the therapeutic setting. And I feel like that mentality really needs to be applied to just the general population too.
Oh.
Like, I don't know. Cause
Yeah.
I know athletes are, they definitely have that brain of motivation. They're always going to be rehabbing themselves because they understand the process and they have to do it. But yeah, I feel as though it would be great to find solutions to help general population maintain the transferability, like being able to do all this stuff by themselves and continue
Yeah,
outside
and
of
it's
therapy or anything.
the hard
Yeah.
part about general population though is we have this great thing called free will and choice.
I've heard of
And
that
when it
before.
comes down to it, some people are more motivated in certain departments than others, and so you do have to play into that. We see that a lot more on the industrial side, right? Because
Yeah.
these are our everyday people coming in.
Yeah, there you go. You deal with
Like
that. Yeah.
yeah, we
Yeah.
do, because ultimately a lot of these people will come in and you're going to work and you're going to work, and it's going to be a strenuous job to an extent,
Yeah.
and they're going to
So
work in
true.
ways that they've never had to before. And so teaching the basics of the importance of stretching, the importance of hydration throughout the day, the importance of eating a meal before you come in for a 10-hour shift. You would be surprised at the people that get lightheaded and sick feeling midway through the day, and it's like, did you have breakfast before you came in? No. Did you have anything at first break? No. Okay. Well, you can't drive a car without gasoline. What makes you
True.
think you can use your body in a strenuous way without fuel? Like, the nutrition side of it is important. And then, a lot of times through talking to people, you'll find they have different reasons for not, and
People don't eat.
sometimes, yeah. And
People
some
don't
of
eat.
it,
It's crazy.
some people it's as much as, well, I just wasn't hungry when I got started and then I got sidetracked and didn't think about it. Okay, that's
My
acceptable.
case. Yeah.
But then you have those extreme cases where people are like, I can't afford it. And so the cool thing is, I work for a company where we have resources to help associates out in those cases. And so it's about listening to people, not just hammering, okay, this is important, you got to do this, but finding out why did they not do it in the first place. Having those conversations is super important, because that helps build the trust.
Yeah.
Because it takes trust to get people to understand that you're in their corner. You want to see them better. A lot of times I tell our associates, I want to see you leave here as good as you came, if not better. I'm not doing my job if I'm not accomplishing at least one of those. And it would be awesome if it was both, because I want you to understand that the things we talk about in making you better is not just for here at work, but can also be applied at home. When you're cleaning, when you're picking up your kid or your grandkid, like, those are important things that people do every day in terms of lifting and all these different things. And they don't even realize it. You put two and two together and then you see the light bulb come on and they're like, oh, I get it now.
Well, it almost sounds to me like that is a way better way to approach general fitness, just from what you're telling people, than something an Instagram trainer or like a coach would even have to say. Sometimes, I mean, you're probably seeing it too. Maybe it just starts with that simplicity. People aren't eating enough. It's like, you have to eat meals. You're right. You have to fuel your car. You got to put gas in it in order to make any kind of progress anywhere. So
yes. And then you got to have oil in it too. Yeah. Like, there's all these different facets to getting an automobile to go. And it's the same thing for our bodies. You can't just do food without water. You can't do water without food. Like, you got to have sometimes there's a need for electrolyte and adding those in depending on the level of, it's
pretty
super
amazing.
important. And a lot of people just don't have the general knowledge because it's not available, or it is, and they don't know that it is. Right. I'd asked a question of someone the other day, like, it's so frustrating because people have a choice in this and they don't know it. And that the other person responded, you're right. Like, there's a difference in education throughout the country. And so some people are more privileged to information than others. And also when you look at neighborhood cultures, different neighborhoods are exposed to different information based on living and living arrangements. And we know that there are people that live better off than others. And there are people that live in very poor conditions. And those people in the poor conditions, while they may have cell phones, they may not know the world that is at their fingertips, to be able to access this. And a lot of them may not even have the cell phones to even attempt to access it. So there's so many different facets and levels to accessibility that is so important to keep in mind. And so when I'm talking to my associates, I want to get to know them a little bit better on that side of it, to understand what we're working with and how we need to go about getting them to understand the importance of it.
Do you think people are more inclined to just spend the money on an expensive trainer, even though they have the phone and they have access to all that knowledge free of charge? Do you think they just, at the end of the day, they're like, I still don't want to do it. I still don't want to have to learn it. So I'm going to pay you.
I think it's twofold. Some people are like, okay, if I financially commit, then that hurts a little bit. Like, that takes some money out of the pocket. So hopefully that will help me to commit all in. But at the end of the day, it's about motivation, right? And determination and routine. Making something routine is super important. In terms of prehab exercises that we have our athletes do on the Team USA side, talking about the importance of this needs to be done so many times a week.
Yeah.
It's one of those is technically a non-negotiable. It is negotiable because you can choose to do it or not. But we know if you do it, it will make you stronger and it will prevent injuries down the road, versus if you choose not to, then we know that you're more at risk for injury in these different areas. And so, it's one of those, you hope you put the money you take the money out of the bank and you put it into paying somebody, even, let's say post-injury, go into physical therapy. You would be surprised at the people that sign up for physical therapy and are paying these copays, but they're not good at attending because they don't like the way they feel when they're doing it, even though it's good for them to get them better. And they get in this mindset of, oh, well, I'll be fine without it. I don't need it that bad. And so they just stop going, even though they're financially putting something into it. So it's that free will part of it. It's a hard thing to overcome.
It's weird because it's oftentimes like what you said, money doesn't even guarantee motivation. The fact that you spend it, you might give up halfway through. But you mentioned Team USA. Do you work with, I think my dad had told me, is you work with the Paralympic team, right?
Yeah. USA women's goalball. It's one word, Goalball.
Goalball. I know that.
Yep.
I've seen that. I watched it. Really crazy stuff. That's awesome.
It's pretty cool. It's cool. We joke that it's the greatest sport that nobody's ever seen, and funny enough, it's a visual impairment sport. So.
I watched it, but it's almost like I really like the skill that they have, just being visually impaired and everything, and literally still being able to do that. It's pretty crazy. It's
awesome. It's a great sport, and it's definitely been one of the pinnacles of my career to get to work with those ladies. And we just got back from Tokyo, brought home the silver. Dang proud of that silver. Fought hard for it, tooth and nail. Several games where we came down from being behind and not only came back, but won. And so pretty proud. And it's would we like to have brought the gold home? Sure. We had some things outside of our control that kind of came into play in that last game. And so we're dang proud of what we did as a team.
Sure.
Those girls, we called them 6 deep, and it's because sometimes you field teams and you may have 4 out of 6 that are really strong. But all 6 of these ladies were really, really strong, and we knew we could put any of them in at any point and they would step up. And they got to prove that actually in the semifinal game against Brazil. We went into 2 different extra times, which is sudden death, 3-minute.
Oh, wow.
And came out of that still swinging, still tied up. And so it went into extra throws, and it's pretty much kind of like soccer where it's 1 against 1. And you got to defend and you got to throw. And so all 6 got to go in, and it was actually our 6th player that blocked the final ball that helped secure the win to make it to the gold medal game. So when we say 6 strong, 6 deep, they proved that day after day. So
jeez and Pete, that's crazy. And do you work with like the Paralympics as a whole, or is it just that team?
Just that team. On? So I work through the national governing body, which is the USABA, US Association of Blind Athletes. If you haven't checked them out, check them out. They're the national governing body, or the organization that oversees the USA women's and men's goalball team.
Are they on Instagram? Because I'll tag them whenever I put this out. Okay, just making sure.
The USABA is, and USA Women's Goalball is. Both of them are on Instagram, so definitely.
Okay.
love to share the love for both of those. Oh
hell yeah, we're gonna do. Yeah, I'll tag a bunch of people and be like,
and Team USA awesome. Too. I mean, we do fall under the USOPC as the national governing body, or not national, but as our organizing committee. So. The many different facets to all of that, and it's cool.
We'll become famous through this podcast. What's going to happen?
That sounds good.
That's exactly that's the plan here. But that's cool though, and I like the differences in the sports and everything. And I think it would be very nice if I think the Paralympics are gaining popularity, or at least that's what I'm seeing, especially from this last time, because I saw a lot more, I guess, televised commercials for the Paralympics this time around.
Yes.
And
So there's a big push. So a lot of people don't realize. So there's the Olympics, which everybody knows about, every 4 years, this time 5 because of COVID, but every 4 years you have the Olympics. And what a lot of people don't know is that the Paralympics follow up usually about 2 weeks after. It gives the host country time to restock the venues, get everything cleaned out and ready for the next group of people to come in. And the Paralympics, a lot of people think para meaning paraplegic, but really it's meant to be parallel to the Olympics. That's where the para comes in, because it's not just paraplegics that compete in the Paralympics. It's visually impaired, it's quadriplegics, it's amputees. Like there are a lot of different physical disabilities that compete in the Paralympics versus the Olympics. And I can tell you they train equally as hard. They train every day, just like the Olympic athletes do. And so it's super important that those guys get the recognition that they deserve. And the NBC stepped up this year. And that's why you saw a lot more commercials. That we are Team USA is one, like we're all Team USA. We all represent Team USA.
It's representation. Yeah.
Yeah. And the USOPC is really stepping that up. It used to be the USOC, US Olympic Committee, and now it's the US Olympic and Paralympic Committee. That was a big step up they did about 3-4 years ago. And that was a big change that I really think is going to help change the culture of what people see in the Paralympics. A lot of people confuse the Paralympics for the Special Olympics. Both are great entities, but the Special Olympics deals with mental disabilities. The Paralympics is physical. There's nothing wrong with these guys mentally. It is all physical disability. And so it's it's fun to watch. They're fun sports, like wheelchair rugby. Those guys will forever have a place in my heart because they're the ones that got me started.
I didn't even know that existed. How about that?
It is awesome.
That's so cool.
Wheelchair basketball has gotten a lot of media, which is very well deserved. Worked with a lot of those athletes in the past, and they're just good people. They train hard. They deserve every bit of recognition that they get. So
I just feel like wheelchair rugby would hurt like hell, considering how rough. I mean, you got a wheelchair in there. It's like, geez, these guys must be the toughest people on the planet. I was just like, I tried rugby for like a hot second at like a club thing, and I was like, this freaking sport is crazy.
It is crazy. And the cool thing about wheelchair rugby is that they're all quadriplegics or have a disability in all 4 limbs. So they may be an amputee of all 4 limbs, or they're quadriplegics. And, talk about changing the narrative there. Most people think quadriplegic, you're stuck in a bed the rest of your life. You're stuck in a power chair the rest of your life. And that's not the case for these guys. They use what we call everyday wheelchairs. They're, the more sleek designs, and they operate just like you and I. They just have some kind of dysfunction in all 4 limbs. And it may be that resulted from a cervical fracture or a cervical injury of some sort, but it did not leave them laying in a bed the rest of their life. So if anybody needed to hear that, know that if you're quadriplegic, it doesn't mean you got to stay in bed.
No,
there are different things that can come from that. So
not
a dissonance
more often. No, that's so true. It's funny because just my brain went straight to that. I was like, Jesus Christ, I don't want to play wheelchair rugby. I don't
They're tough guys, I tell you.
I'm gonna get my head kicked in. No kidding. For sure. Jeez and Pete's, that's insane. But that's cool though. I love that you're involved with that. And I didn't. It's funny because I realized right when you said Special Olympics compared to the Paralympics, you forget about the different divisions, because I've heard about the Paralympics a lot, but then there's a lot to do with the Special Olympics as well. And I guess that's not talked about as much as the Paralympics would be.
But here's what's interesting is a lot of people will be like, oh, I'm with Team USA. I'm a Paralympic athlete. And you're like, oh, I have a family member that competed in the Special Olympics. And it's like, two different things. Like
wrong.
No, not so much. That's great. It's not bad. Like they have a place, and I never want to take away from what the Special Olympics does.
Oh, hell no.
But the Special Olympics, it is for people with mental disabilities. They do not train every day. Some do. But for the most part, those are special events that are held
different approach.
For that population versus the Paralympic athletes. They're training just like Olympic athletes are training every day. They're on, strict nutrition regimens, a lot of them. All of those things that go into the highest level of sport these Paralympic athletes are doing. And so that's why we want to make sure the distinction is understood. They deserve that because they're putting in the same work. It is parallel to, although some things are still not 100% parallel to, which was a big campaign push this year, to find more of that equality for sure.
Now I'll ask you this, just as kind of a side question. When you did watch just the Olympics in general this year, what did you think about it? What were your initial thoughts?
So I think my perspective is going to be a little bit different. I was very emotional watching it, knowing in a few weeks I was going to be going myself. I grew up watching the Olympics. I have VHS tapes that my mom did from the 96 Olympics. Like, I grew up a big Team USA fan. Wow. It was ingrained from an early age. And I don't, for some reason, I just
like that passion for it. Yeah, you know, that's like I feel it too. Like I love just seeing USA compete. It's nice.
Yeah. You know? The one thing that I've always loved about the Olympics, and this might be the cheesiest thing in the world, and I'll own that, is that the unity that you feel for a couple of weeks while the Olympics is on, it is about sport, it is about competition, and it is about nothing else. Yeah. It is about everybody coming together for one event, and it does not matter. Everything else outside of it gets pushed to the side. Now, we know historically there have been some years where that was not the case.
For sure.
But for the most part, you get that feeling of unity and just the emotion that comes behind that. That is what I gravitate towards, the ability to come together with all these different countries. That's one thing that was so cool about being there. I've waited 15 years to get to the Paralympics or Olympics, either one. I got to go to the Paralympics.
You did it.
And I got to tell you, the cool thing is everybody had always talked about being in the village, being in the dining hall. You get to mingle with all these other countries. And the cool thing is not just mingling with other countries, but I knew so many people from other countries from my experiences over the last 15 years of former athletes that compete for other countries. And so getting to see them again after years of not seeing them and getting to, you know, COVID obviously changed the ability to hug everybody, which really sucks. But air hugs, high fives in the air, all that good stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a really cool thing to see so many different people come together. You know, you got the pin trading game. That's a real big part of it, is everybody brings their delegation pins and their sport specific pins.
Yeah.
And it is quite the, you got to be ruthless about it if you want to be good at it.
I can picture like just some athletes playing craps on the ground. Like, I'll trade you one of my pins. I don't know, like an old timey.
It's funny. You know who to ask and who not, because everybody's wearing the lanyards with your credentials on them. And most people will have them tied to the lanyards. That's your easiest go-to of, I think I can get one. Not always. The hard part is
scoping it out. Yeah.
You are. Like, you want to get the countries. The countries that are smaller delegations, you know, those are going to be harder to find. And so you really seek those out. It's a whole game.
So it's like a collection thing. It's like you're collecting these special pits. That's cool. I don't know.
Yeah. I got a whole towel that's completely filled up with them. It's pretty cool.
That's awesome. That's pretty. You just snuck in. You're like, just grab one and be like, no, I didn't see your pin. I don't know where it is. I saw it there a second ago. I guess it must be gone. Yeah, somewhere. No, but that's cool though. And and it's not cliche when you say unity, I don't think, because we all feel it, you know, especially here, just watching on TV. Like, it really is, even though, you know, with COVID and everything, nobody was in the crowd. There wasn't really that energy that you get. But no, just knowing that our team is out there with all these different sports, considering this Olympics, they just kind of threw a bunch of random sports at it. It was just out of the blue, like skateboarding, surfing. There was like a mountain biking thing. I was like,
surfing. God. Like, there were all these different additions, which is cool to see. And you'll see some of those will go away for Paris, but some others are being added in. Like, breakdancing is being added in Paris.
Oh, that's
who would have thought breakdancing would be an Olympic sport? Like, who would have thought? But the other part of it is COVID did change this set, right? And for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of stress that was included leading up to it, because you had to take a test 92 hours or 76 hours before leaving. You had to take a COVID test as soon as you landed on the ground in Japan, and that determined if you got to go to the village or went to isolation or quarantine. And you had to test every single day while you were there. So there was this added layer of stress, right? But to go back to watching the Olympic side of it before we even left, I can tell you, like, it was different watching without the crowd. That was a very different
Yeah,
aspect to it. And it sucks because it took away, right? Like the athletes feed off of that energy. That's an important part of sport.
And shoot,
but
the people watching, like I feed off of it too. When I see people like going crazy in the crowds, like I'm
because
right
for
there
some
with them.
sports where you may not fully understand all of the rules of it, you're going to feed off of people that know a lot more, right? And when they're getting hyped, you get hyped. It's just kind of secondary. But one thing that I did think was really cool is how NBC did bring the families in. The emotion of those athletes, and I can't explain. You've trained for 5 years, usually 4, but now 5 for this one.
Yeah.
And you've put so much of your life on hold and for an extra year it included, and your family's a part of that. Like people don't realize that the family sacrifices, they put a lot of time in that as well. And it may not be for the older athletes, it may not be as peripheral as it was when the athlete was a kid, but that was an important part of them getting to become an Olympic or Paralympic athlete. And so for the families to not be able to be there, it just added this extra layer of emotion for the athletes.
For sure.
To me, watching at home, knowing those sacrifices made, that I've seen my athletes themselves make it, and to see the emotion, I keep thinking back to the swimming races. There were so many emotional family connections over thousands of miles through Zoom, like what we're doing right now. And to see the emotion of, I'm so dang proud of you. I'm so dang proud of myself. And I'm so sad that you were not here to celebrate this with me, or that we're not together to celebrate it. That added some extra emotion that a lot of people, I think they saw it because NBC did a great job of showing it, through video, but to know what my athletes were personally going through, and to know that family and friends couldn't go that would have gone otherwise. You can't show that part of it. And that's a big part. So I found myself, I'm not going to be 100% honest. I cried during a lot of medal ceremonies. I boohooed my eyes out because I know what it meant to those athletes. I know what it means to represent the country.
But I appreciate that as an American too. Like I just appreciate that emotion was there. Like that's
for sure.
That's awesome.
It's an honor, right? Yeah. Like I'm an athletic trainer. Nobody knows who I am. I am what we call the team behind the team. And
the backbone.
But there's a lot of sacrifices made for me and my family too. And so I feel that on a deep level. And it really is an honor to represent your country in that kind of way. There's nothing better than hearing the national anthem played. I get really emotional, and it's funny because as a kid growing up, I knew that the national anthem was important. But talk about standing in another country and hearing it played, that'll make the hair stand on the back of your head. It's super special. So
start flipping off the other athletes. We got
right?
you. No, I don't think. Pretty sure that'd be frowned upon. Yeah,
pretty much.
Yeah, it wouldn't be good sportsmanship in the classics. Yeah.